Hey guys, welcome back to the Results Junkies podcast. We are talking about AI and Super Bowls. Lots of stuff going on there. I am surprised to learn that Mr. Singh was paying attention to the commercials on the Super Bowl, which as of time of recording was last night. I think I watched all the same ones that you want to talk about during the show. We're also going to talk a little bit about AI in general, and then some stuff that OpenAI is releasing in terms of what they're calling deep research. Mr. Singh, how the heck are you?
I'm good, man. I don't want to. I'm afraid Eagles fans will find me and destroy my house or something like that. But I didn't really have a personal connection to either one of the teams, so I really was just kind of trying to crush email and hang out with my family while the game was on, and then the commercial would come on and try to watch that. So yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good.
That makes much more sense, by the way, especially going back to our experience in revolving hockey in Kelowna at the very beginning of the tech tour.
That's right. Yeah, it's sports ball.
Well played.
So, yeah, no, it was. I'm good, man. I'm good. No travel this week, although maybe a couple quick day trips coming up in the next couple days. Vegas in a couple weeks for an award, and maybe squeeze in a little birthday trip somewhere in there as well.
I heard that there might be a birthday trip. Yeah, I heard that. I heard that.
But yeah, anyway, all good here. How about you? I fully expected you to not be in your home office today.
Yeah, I won't be here for long. Actually, it's interesting. I'm like dealing with like one of those work things I've done for years and years and years that is moving to a place technologically that maybe it should, but I'm struggling with. We're open enrollment for health insurance, and apparently the company that we're using, their standard is verbal acknowledgement by the employee that they want to sign up for coverage. And when I learned this today, at a time that was probably later than I should have been learning it, I was disturbed at a very visceral level that we're committing hourly employees to hundreds of dollars a month in payments because they said yes to a company that is incentivized and paid when they say yes. So
interesting.
I need to unwind this as soon as we're done recording.
Is this, obviously don't share anything you can't share, is this like a specific state requirement, or like is it one of the states you're in that requires this, or is this something more broad?
No, this is just the way the company that we hired to do open enrollment conducts their process, and that they believe that verbal acknowledgement is sufficient in an industry standard. And I said, in my industry, it's not. So we're just switching from their industry to my industry because when the employee says, "Why did you take my money?" they're not going after the company that signed them up for open enrollment. They're coming after me.
Yeah, they're coming after you. Yeah.
That's right. So I'm going to make sure
that works.
I'm going to make sure my fanny is rightfully and fully covered before I start taking money out of employees' checks.
Well, I don't think anybody is here to think about your fanny. So thanks for the mental model.
Here for you, Mr. Singh. All right, so let's do a little housekeeping, and then we'll get into AI, and it involves podcasts too. There's a podcast angle. There's always a podcast angle, Mr. Singh. You wait for it. So show@resultsjunkies.com is how you can email us questions, comments, concerns. He is at Paul Singh on all those social media channels, and I am at Pizza in Motion. So let's start with the Super Bowl commercials, and then we can sort of go through Sam's email and then finish up with this deep research piece.
Love it. I love it. All right, Super Bowl. Again, I'm afraid of Phillies fans. They are the worst. They'll come find me. But the commercials, I thought, obviously you have like the normal bit of humor and stuff like that. What particularly kind of caught my admittedly nerdy attention was potentially how many dollars were spent trying to create ads that were emotional, like that tried to drive emotional connection to some of these AI tools that are available now. So
yeah,
the one that I talked to you about in the pre-show, the one that really kind of got me thinking about this was the Google Gemini ad. I'm pretty sure it was Gemini, where it was the dad in the kitchen, and in the first 10 seconds, you don't know what he's doing. He's like talking on his phone, but what becomes clear very quickly is that he's practicing for an interview. And I guess the audio assistant is coming back and saying, "Okay, what's your biggest challenge?" And then it talks about how it visually switches to him being a dad. I just thought it was really interesting because then when you put two and two together, there was that ad, and there was another ad for ChatGPT. There was a third ad. So I just thought it was really interesting that a lot of money is being spent trying to get people to be emotionally connected to these chat assistants. So let me let me pause there before we go a little bit deeper, because I think when I brought this up, I got the impression you didn't think it was that useful. I think you made this kind of comment in our text chain. You're like, wasted money or something like that. But
Yes, when I look back at our text chain, how to light money on fire for no enterprise value is what I said so eloquently, and that might be over exaggerating it by just a skosh. But to your point, like the Gemini ad definitely definitely talked more towards here's a direct application for how you can use AI in your life to make your life better. And I thought I actually thought for that ad that it was a good use of a Super Bowl ad, because I think you and I talked about this on the show a couple times where I'm still at a loss for how I would use it. And I ask frequently anybody who uses one of the tools, like, tell me the things you use it for. And because I'm trying to think of ways to get value out of it myself, especially when it comes to saving time. I thought the OpenAI commercial was less direct in that manner, or maybe less, maybe just less of a connection from an individual standpoint. Like to your point, I still felt like it was a feel good ad. I think, as I said to you sort of sarcastically in pre-show, it was more like maybe they're targeting these ads because they have so much money to spend right now, and they're obviously spending a bunch of money on lobbying and stuff like that. But the thing here was, well, we could spend a few $1,000,000 on a Super Bowl ad, and given how much subscription growth they've had, maybe we can make people feel like they need it. This FOMO, if you will, that was different than Google Gemini saying, here's a way we can help you get prepared for your interview, which I thought was a very relatable benefit.
I think, I think you make some interesting points there. I would say that my view on this is slightly different. I think there's a tremendous land grab happening here right now. So think about it this way. Once you picked, like, I know you have an iPhone, right? Once you selected the iPhone platform, you became more and more locked in over time. And it's so much so that it's probably difficult for you to consider switching to something else. I don't know how to articulate this very well, but I think that we're at that stage, or we're getting very close to that stage, as it relates to these assistants. Because whether you start saying Gemini versus ChatGPT versus Facebook's Meta, the glasses commercial that came on.
Yeah.
Whatever you lock into at scale, that's going to become the thing you stick with. And I think the dollars you're seeing spent right now, I'll agree with you that they're probably not going to be easy to attribute back to, engagement. I mean, maybe they'll see some increase, but you're not going to be able to say it was that ad or whatever. But I think what we're seeing here is a land grab, because it is very difficult now to say anything other than, for example, Siri and Alexa.
Yeah.
I mean, even my kids are getting to the point now where they learn, I admit openly, I hate these like dots that I have throughout the house. I just have them from years ago. But my kids are getting used to the idea of, hey, turn on the loft lamp, turn off the loft lamp. Like that's about all we use it for. They use it to set timers. It's so much so that like they're almost asking Alexa before they, ask their iPads for something. So I don't know. I just wonder if there's like something about consumer behavior and like a land grab happening, and whoever kind of locks in or gets usage from these consumers ends up having the ability to kind of like present more and more features to these users and add more value. So maybe that's where we're at right now, but what do I know? I'm got a little basement office here and still not sure how to really use these tools to their full extent.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue to the article in TechCrunch that we'll link to, which cites Sam Altman's letter to his email list. And I think, and then I have a personal experience I want to share too, because I think this goes back to the progress for these individual models. But while there's a lot to read in Sam's letter, I think he talks about how his belief that AI will be generally positive for society, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that there's likely going to be some turmoil between the start line and the finish line. And I don't think that's terribly surprising to you and I. I mean, like the train put a lot of people out of work. When all of a sudden you could get across the country in 13 days instead of 3 months. And then the airplane put a lot of train employees out of work when you could get across the country in 10 hours with the first airplanes. Versus 4 hours today, and like all of these things, like the technology is generally speaking recessionary. But what he talks about, which I think is more interesting, is that that not everybody may feel the individual effects of AI. And he talks about this, and I'll quote this: "Many of us expect to need to give people more control over the technology than we have historically. And then paraphrasing, and then he says, and accept that there is a balance between safety and individual empowerment that will require trade-offs. I think it's of all the things I've heard him say, this is probably one of the most honest things I've heard him say in regards to where the industry should go and how it should balance these two things. I don't know what the right answer is, but clearly, people need to understand what those trade-offs are for their data. You and I talked about it just last week about, well, hey, I mean, Google turned on some Gemini features, for you and didn't tell you that it was doing that. And if it was in regards to your investment portfolio and cataloging that information, the risk reward might be there for you. But on the strata side of things, it could be a HIPAA violation. And so being able to toggle for different businesses is critically important.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this is going to sound a little snarky. I don't know where that guy finds the time to write this stuff, because I remember reading, I signed up to his email list years ago, I guess, and saw that email come through this weekend, and I was like, where in the world is he writing this from? But, that being said, I mean, I don't think any of it was surprising in the sense that, like, with something that has the potential, like, nobody can clearly define how capable these models are going to be. All we know is directionally they seem to be evolving faster than any of us kind of understand. Their use cases are growing. I mean, even with like the deep research announcement they had a week or two ago, I mean, the capabilities are increasing. You've got companies open sourcing them, which is great, but that also opens up the possibility of who's using these things and what controls do they have in place.
Right.
So it's not surprising. Anything that's powerful like this typically has some restriction on its use. So I don't know. I didn't find that part impressive or like scary or anything like that. There was a part near the top of the article that sort of caught my attention a little bit more so, and that was where he said he was trying to define AGI, artificial general intelligence, and he goes on to say it's a system that can tackle increasingly complex problems at a human level in many fields. And then he goes on and he says, and he warns that it may require lots of human supervision and direction. So it's sort of the plain English version of the same passage, of the passage you kind of read about, I think.
Yeah.
Is that he's basically saying this thing's gonna be powerful, probably so powerful that, the way I read it is it's probably gonna require some regulation around it. Now, counter argument, the snarky person listening to this right now is gonna say, of course the guy with potentially the most valuable company in AI is going to want it regulated because he can help define the rules. Okay, that is probably fair to say.
Great way to build the wall around the garden.
That's exactly right. Fair to say, but it doesn't seem wrong. I don't think somebody should be open sourcing the most powerful versions of this and then allowing it to connect to your kid's paintball machine and guard the front yard.
Yeah, no,
which actually would be kind of fun to watch.
That would be. But you're right. It's all about perspective. Using the example that I gave earlier on HIPAA violations with Strata versus results junkies. I mean, these things are all going to have varying levels of importance. And I would say there's two use cases that I encountered in the past week since you and I recorded last, as it relates to the usefulness of AI, if you will. And one of them is still more focused on this enterprise value, and one of them is more focused narrowly. And I said there was a podcast connection, and actually, as I realized and think about it, both of these have a podcast connection. So first off, at the high level, on a different podcast, Chuck Todd's podcast, he had a guest on, they were talking about AI, and they were talking about, that wasn't the main topic, but the comment that I think his guest brought up was, the value of AI is that they believe in the next 9 to 12 months that scientists / doctors will have a full database of every single correct compound to inject to save people's lives from snake bites. And the theory is that, snake bite venom has proteins in it, and because there are so few snake bites, nobody's ever taken the time to sit in the lab and say, well, what if I use this protein and what is this? And so like when you think about paralysis and death and all the things that can be caused from a snake bite, but again, there are so few snake bites that we hear about that cause these sorts of things that you never put the money behind the research. And here's a computer doing the research of humans, and that they expect within a year that every doctor in the world will have the ability to click on something that will tell them, oh, okay, snake looks like this, inject this. And that's
Yeah.
something that we've never had before. So there's the incredible enterprise value and cultural value, like societal value. On the flip side, also a podcast connection. I'm working on, wait for it, a third podcast. Your wife will be happy to know. Planning to launch a Disney podcast soon. And my co-host for that podcast is a little bit more tech savvy when it comes to the GPTs of the world. And so she fed into Chat GPT, hey, here's some information about our podcast. Can you make me a logo? And in both of these instances, she told ChatGPT the name of the podcast. And in one of the versions, the word castle was in the name. And in another one, the word dispatch was in the name. And so she's feeding this in via text prompt, not voice prompt, and then make me a logo. And in both cases, when it produced the logo, it misspelled castle and dispatch. And I won't say that this set me back a number of months from trusting one of these models. I probably will sign up for one in the next 30 days for a different reason. Somebody showed me a potential research purpose, which we'll talk about more generally in a second. But my trust level on the models has definitely been degraded some when it can't spell the word that you gave it and said include this word in the thing. Like there's, it's a very smart computer. It's doing billions of computations, but somewhere in there is a bug that says, that didn't say correctly, take the text that they said and put it in the logo. So, TBD on when that stuff will be sufficiently de-risked that consumers can rely on it, and that risk reward factor of like, look, nobody else is doing the snake venom research. So even if you're wrong and you give the wrong protein to somebody to inject it to try and save their life, you didn't know what to give them before. So there's very little risk there, and you might save their life if the database is correct. On the flip side, like I'm probably not having it design me too many logos just yet that have words in them.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so a lot to unpack there.
A lot. You're welcome.
Yeah. So here's the thing. And I'm probably mixing up a couple of different comments you made there. I don't generally disagree with a lot of the stuff you said. I would just go on to say maybe that there are certain industries where I think we should be a lot more careful about, letting AI come in. So for example, I kind of would like my surgeon to not be using an AI tool to figure out what to do when they cut me open.
Yeah.
I say that jokingly, but that's important to me. Like we send these people to school for a decade before they're often allowed to.
If you don't mind me interrupting, asking you a question though, how do you feel about a surgeon having a robot do the surgery?
My mediocre, arbitrary understanding of using a robot for surgery is that the closest we are to that is telehealth, where you could have a highly precise robot, theoretically 100 miles away that's being controlled by a licensed surgeon, but it still has limitations around things like what happens when the connectivity drops. You still got to have somebody that can be there as the fail safe. So we don't truly, my understanding, if I understand where you're going with this, is we don't really have a robot doing the surgery on its own. It's being directed by a human, usually in the same room.
It is being directed by a human and in the same room, right? But to some degree, there's some level, and like we learned this a little bit in terms of our son's recent surgery, that the surgeon was talking about, I like this model of robot better than this model of robot based on how it performs things. And my dad's getting ready to have knee surgery, and the doctor was talking about how, this next model, is able to do things that the previous model couldn't do. And I found that really interesting to listen to them say that, because to your point, I agree, like there are medical decisions I don't want, the surgeon abdicating to a robot. But clearly there's some level of onboarding of logic in these versions of robots that are performing surgery today, where it's not just, a doctor with two joysticks. It's, there's some level of, I don't know if it's parameters or what have you, but it's very, to be clear, not disagreeing with you. It's an insanely interesting topic to me that doctors are embracing this and saying, if we performed 100 of these operations, they're X% more effective when robot Johnny performs it versus robot, Janie.
Yeah. It's I don't know what the right term here is, but when we think about, like, let's just use self-driving cars as just for a moment here. You've got Tesla that talks about FSD, full self-driving, but,
Yeah.
if you then talk to, like, the robotics nerds, they would define it as, well, it's level 3, it's not fully autonomous. I think it's level 3. However, on the other hand, you have Mercedes who I think have the next level up, where
Hmm.
it seems advanced enough where in the state of California, if you see a Mercedes with a certain shade of blue color lights on, that's your visual indicator that
Yeah.
it's not under human control.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's under self-driving. And so, I think what we're getting into here with, I think where we're heading in this conversation is this like kind of point where we have to define like some rules, maybe define some places where it's probably okay for AI to be involved and because mistakes aren't fatal or going to cause financial ruin to somebody, and maybe limit it in other places. So, for example, if I was writing a contract with somebody we were going to invest in, and I think I've thrown poor Rob, the attorney, under the bus a couple times. you know, if something goes sideways, we have the ability to look at Rob and ask what went sideways.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I'd ever feel comfortable bypassing Rob. However,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
comfortable with Rob maybe using a tool to, to expedite his review of a document, as long as the final approval or thumbs up to do the deal comes from Rob.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's why, we like to work with Rob. Same thing I would say in a similar vein here with like a doctor. If the doctor is maybe transcribing my conversation with them and then letting that tool suggest things, as long as the ultimate decision on what my treatment's going to be comes from the doctor and I can look him in the eye or look her in the eye,
Right.
then that tool, that AI tool that maybe help them remember it's to your point, like with that snake bite, like I can't reasonably expect one doctor somewhere to remember 37 different species of snakes,
Right. Right.
but the idea of like, hey, point your iPhone at the snake picture and have it tell you, like, I can get around that. So I forget exactly how we got down to this topic or this particular topic, but I guess where I was going with it is that like, I think that there's a lot of conversation about like, you know, I guess where I'm going with this is the topic we're talking about is Sam Altman's point or his comment that AI benefits may not be widely available. I don't think that's a bad thing because I'm not
Mm.
sure that
Yeah.
for me as a consumer, I'm not sure I'm ready to like totally give up looking at a human when it comes to potentially fatal financial or medical kind of decisions.
Yeah.
But the idea of like AI, finding better suggestions to, I don't know, researchers on, hey, here's maybe like some antidotes or whatever to different poisons or whatever. Like, I don't know, that seems okay to me. Yeah. So I mean, his comment doesn't surprise me because like we're talking about something that could have a lot of impact, a lot of
Yeah.
what's the word? Like a lot of okay, here's like kind of the half baked. My whole thought process is half baked today. But here's the thing: you're probably more aware of this than me. But I was just reading an article about the Boom supersonic test flight that happened a week ago or whatever, right?
Yeah. I need to talk to somebody about this. The
I
company that
don't
has
know as
the
much as
company.
you probably know about it, but one of the things I thought was really interesting was this concept, and it could just be a marketing concept that they have, but this concept that they had a boomless flight, meaning like less,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Let's just for the discussion, let's assume everything's true, just for a moment, right? I don't have any reason to deny it or whatever, but let's just talk about that for a minute. It makes you wonder sometimes if a discovery like that, which again, if it's true, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
makes you wonder if a discovery like that could have happened sooner if a machine was running potentially
Mm.
millions of permutations per day,
Right.
something that maybe a very few, trained people around the world can probably do per year because they're not
Yeah.
paid to do that and all that. Just makes you wonder like how many additional benefits to society we might find if deep research like that was in a controlled way was allowed to kind of like go run a million permutations. It kind of here's the last thing I'll say about this. If you go back to history and you think about things like the number zero or different mathematical discoveries that societies had,
Yeah.
very rarely did it actually happen on its own in one place on the planet. More often than not, a very similar discovery was made around the same time in multiple places around the world, but because we couldn't communicate very quickly at the time,
Right.
nobody really knew.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder if like we're very close to, I mean, maybe Renaissance 2.0 is not the right word, but this idea that if machines in a controlled way are allowed to kind of go, deeply research things and then provide maybe researchers with more results to review more quickly, I wonder if overall progress increases for society as a whole. Um, so anyway, now we're getting to philosophy.
Well, and
I don't know
actually,
how we went from like,
it's a really good segue though to I think it's a really good segue though to our other topic, which is this this announcement, about what OpenAI is calling deep research, and we'll link to this in the show notes. But essentially, the quote from their product officer, it can do complex research tasks. It might take a person anywhere from 30 minutes to 30 days. And when I think about this, like I understand this, this isn't necessarily the key use case for it, but what if I could hand, ChatGPT or Claude or one of these folks, my P&Ls for the restaurant and say, tell me what you think the outlook looks like for the next 12 months based on prevailing economic factors outside of our restaurants. Like in theory, they could pull prevailing economic factors from outside the restaurants, a bunch of stuff. And then also on top of that, they obviously have my P&L, so they can see what the trajectory of the business has been historically and say, well, if we believe there's a 32% interest rates go up, what happened the last time interest rates went up at Ed's business? Okay, this is what we think happens. And so, that level of research and extrapolation would take me many hours. And so like those sorts of things are very interesting to me for two reasons. First off, it's work I don't have the time to do now. So definitely see the benefit in it. And the second goes to something that you were talking about before. It's sort of like almost in this like doctor's philosophy of do no harm. Them taking my P&Ls and coming up with a forecast based on prevailing economic factors isn't going to put anybody's life at risk. So if they got it wrong, it's not mission critical research, but they could save a bunch of time, and they probably have a higher percentage getting the right forecast than I do, because I'm human. I could put a 2 when there should be a 7. But the harm factor of if we both got it wrong is much lower than, the wrong robot performing surgery.
Well, so, and I just sent you a link to this as well, or a topic similar to this. Here's the thing. What you're talking about is kind of similar to a lot of other industries that are getting a little scared of these AI assistants. For example, using that analysis or that example you just used actually just a moment ago. Historically, if you wanted to go do that research, look at my P&Ls, figure out what the market outlook is, give me advice, whatever. Historically, you kind of had 3 choices. One is trust your gut, whatever that means. Trust your gut. Option 2 is you go do the homework. You go pull the spreadsheets.
Right.
You go find the citable references, and then you create an analysis, and then you go decide based on that data. Option 3 is you go hire, usually an MBA or a recently graduated MBA, and you title them an analyst of some sort, and you task them with the work, and ultimately they give you an 11,000 word report, and then you have to extrapolate that into what you're going to do next. Either way, it all comes back to you as the decision maker. What we're talking about here with this like deep research tool is that it lets you at least consider more seriously consider options 2 and 3. You could have a tool like this that goes and does that report for you. You could have, or with option 3, that's option 2. And option 3 is you could actually replace that junior MBA, or this other person or this other MBA person you have creates one report, and then your AI assistant creates the other report. Now you have 2 data points to choose against, as you formulate your decision. So really what we're talking about here with the deep research is starting to get into, making junior white collar professions maybe a little more uncomfortable.
More uncomfortable. I love
a little more uncomfortable, right? But we've said this from the earliest days of the tech tour. I don't know if you remember, but like technology always disrupts the middleman or middlewoman. And, historically the middleman was somebody that was gatekeeping information. That's historically what it was, right? Yeah. Like, oh, I have access to the New York Stock Exchange. It's the 1980s. You have to call me to do a trade. And it's got to be worth my time to pick up the phone. Now we're getting into this next, that was 30 years ago, right?
I was just say, I love the fact that you're using an example for something that happened before you were alive.
I was alive. Jeez. I mean,
In the 80s, maybe a little bit.
oh, come on now. Lord. Okay. But now what we're getting into is that, these tools are making a different type of person more uncomfortable, because I don't think any recently graduated MBA, just in this example, I don't think any recent graduate is trying to be a gatekeeper. But you as an employer now, you have to make a decision. You're sitting there thinking, gosh, do I pay somebody 60, 80, 100 grand for an analyst position? Or, is, is it cheaper to maybe invest $200 a month for like the latest models from OpenAI?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a difficult conversation. I mean, I think this probably segues to a different conversation we should have at a different time. But like, I remember 15 years ago thinking, in 2010 maybe, thinking that anybody that studied mathematics, maybe, website design, I felt like they would be pretty safe going into the next generation of work, because you had to think about data and design and distribution. But now, 15 years later, and here we are in 2025, it kind of throws that all off now, because it's like, just to your point, like I typed into ChatGPT the other day, like I uploaded one of my slide templates and was like, okay, and I'm just using the free version. I was like, let me just upload my slide template. And I was like, okay, give me some recommendations to like update the design of this. And it gave me some hex codes. Now, was it perfect? Probably not. But but like prior to that, I'd probably have to like go put something on some design website, and I'm not going to name names. I'll get in trouble here, I'm sure, but like it just made it a lot easier,
Yeah.
and you and I are pretty privileged in the sense that we live in the US, we've done pretty well and all that stuff, but a lot of these benefits have never been available to somebody elsewhere, so I
Yeah.
don't
No,
know.
I agree. And I think, to your point though, going back, you talked about how, you may not, that might be a tough decision between the MBA and the $200 a month person. I'd say, without knowing a $200 a month subscription, sorry, without having done any, no pun intended, research into deep research, if I can cancel on a monthly basis, I feel like the only reason I won't be signed up for this the next time that you and I record is because I didn't find the 10 minutes in my day to sign up. But I would take a $200 flyer right now to throw some stuff into it and see what it spit out, because as a small business, I can't afford to hire the MBA. So,
Yeah.
so I take the fractional chance, and if I don't use it, I'd set a reminder, and if I haven't used it in 30 days, I'd cancel it and go, well, that sucked. I lost that $200. But I think it's, these are the sorts of tools that are going to start to force me to say, well, for $200, could I find a way to be 0.1% more profitable on $15 million worth of revenue in the restaurants? Like, if that's the case, then sure, like spend the $200.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it does make me think that within the next couple of years, business owners like me, and I don't know if this will apply to Five Guys with you, but just hear me out for a second. I think people like me, whether it's on the investor side with Results Junkies or on the, I guess, the employer side with Strata PT, I think it opens up this interesting possibility that in the next couple of years, when you ask me what my team looks like, I might say to you something like, I've got 5 humans on my team and 1,000 AI agents.
Yeah, could be.
I
don't, it's an interesting conversation for us to talk through in the future. I think maybe in a year, I think at some point though, I think the number of agents sort of starts to blend in the background. You start talking about how much you're spending on agents. Because I don't know that the number of agents necessarily matters. I think it matters, when you think about trying to equate a headcount. I have, X dedicated to, because I think like when I think about businesses, it's like we talk about labor cost, and we talk about software costs, and we talk about fixed costs. And so labor cost used to be a variable and had implications like W-2s and all that other stuff, and HR and sexual harassment. And moving things into this AI bucket has financial implication, but very much less of a one-to-one or one-to-many sort of implication in terms of trying to figure those numbers out. And I think we'll start talking about X% of my workforce spend is committed to AI. as opposed to like bodies or number of agents, if you will. Because to your point, I think there could be really, really small agents that do one thing and do one thing really well, and then there could be deep research which does like lots of big things and all kinds of models, in between. Yeah, depending
Absolutely.
on what Anyway, I think that's
Absolutely.
a good place to pin it, especially because I haven't packed yet, and I'm supposed to get on a plane in like, I don't know, 18 hours, and we're supposed to get 8 inches of snow. So, yeah.
Well, good for you to being able to leave. If I proposed leaving with an impending snowstorm and schools closing, I mean, you know how it is here in Virginia. It's like a stiff breeze will shut everything down in Lawton County.
We're going to be without bread and milk for like 2 weeks at the rate we're going.
Of course. Yeah. End of the world here coming.
Yeah.
So
no school this week at all. After they say that they won't go to school tomorrow, they won't go to school the rest of the week.
Yeah, that's basically how we're operating at this point at home.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Smart.
Yeah. Anyway, well, safe travels. Hopefully, they're taking you somewhere fun, and I'm excited to see you when you get back.